thank you all for coming out to this beautiful facility, and I hope that you all get a chance to walk around and enjoy the grounds after the meeting if you did not already do so beforehand. A couple of quick notes before we get started. I'd like to thank everyone who attended the cultural awareness workshops this past week. Thank you. I think a lot was learned. It was an eye-opening experience, and we hope we can practice what we learned there. Also, with the heat of the summer settling in, I'd like to remind everyone to take precautions when you're out in the garden, hydrate, find some shade when you need to, take breaks, and just be aware of the effects that the heat can have on your body and take the precautions. So moving along, I'd like to introduce our speaker today, Matt Orwatt. So Matt is the agricultural agent for Dallas. And prior to this, Matt worked as a horticulture agent at the University of Florida's Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences for 12 years. Matt received a Bachelor of Science in Biology with an emphasis in botany from the University of Texas at Arlington, and he holds a Master's in Horticulture from the Texas A&M University. Matt enjoyed studying native plant ecology, prairie preservation, and greenhouse production of tropical plants. His mission is to provide educational programming to support small farmers in the areas of ornamental, turf, fruit, and vegetable gardening. Matt started gardening at an early age growing up in Fort Worth, Texas. He has a passion for roses. When he was 13, his mom bought home one rose bush, and the rest is history. By high school, he was growing 83 rose bushes and competed in local rose shows. In graduate school at A&M, he evaluated genetic traits for disease resistance in the rose breeding and genetic program. So please give a warm welcome to Matt Orwatt. Thank you.
So the heat is on, right? So I hope it's not as bad as last year. So I've had a good 12 years in Florida, and I got to experience, while we didn't have the heat in North Florida, I'm saying far northwest Florida, as we do here. It didn't get as hot, but it got a lot more humid, and we had a lot more plant disease issues. So I got to really experience plant diseases. And one thing I've noticed here coming back to Texas is we had an unusually wet spring, and my roses, I didn't spray because I don't care to spray, but I will if I have to, fungicide, and I didn't this year, and I had a lot of roses that some were resistant and didn't get any disease, and some did, and I was about to throw them away. But then the heat came, and the ones that were getting all the diseases decided to bloom and look beautiful. So, because there's no more disease, and it's hot, and those roses love the heat, and the ones that were doing beautiful in the rain are doing bad now. And so it's a switch. And one of my favorite roses that did well in both times, but just loving the heat, write this down. Now, this is not your most sustainable. I mean, it's not like a Belinda's Dream, where it's going to just bloom like crazy, but you have to water it a lot and give it a little bit of fertilizer. But it's called Crescendo, and it has won show roses at lots of exhibitions, but it's fairly disease resistant and fragrant. And in this hot weather, this one plant has about 25 blooms on it right now. And they're all perfectly formed. It's beautiful. And they're white and they turn pink in the sunlight. So they're really nice. It's called Crescendo. And it's one of my new favorites, even though I didn't ever grow it before. This is the first year I ever grew it, so I planted it in February. So it's new, and it's still blooming like crazy. So anyway, I just wanted to let you know that that's what I'm experiencing. And so if you decide you want to get one, they only sell them bare-rooted in the spring from Jackson and Perkins, and nobody else sells it. So, but there are a lot of other roses that are being bred now that are very sustainable and have been bred with really good disease-resistant genetics. So, and then Dr. George is going to be coming out next year with some more EarthKind trial data for some new varieties. So that too, so starting next year. So there's a lot coming in the rose world. Of course, rose rosette is always an issue too, but I try to not think about that too much, and do my best to if you see it, the best thing you do is you get an infected plant, remove it, because it takes an infected plant to infect another plant, because it takes that mite to get the virus. So anyway, so I want to talk a little bit about gardening in the heat and sustainable gardening. And by the way, I don't know where she is. Is Jaden in the room anywhere? Jaden's in the back. Jaden is back there in the left. She is also a UTA student, and she is interning with Tarrant County AgriLife as a horticulture and architecture intern for horticulture, and her major is sustainability. And so she is here to join us today, get an experience of a Master Gardener meeting and extension program. So I wanted to talk a little bit about gardening in the heat. So of course we all know about limited water supplies and water conservation, but we do know that as the population grows, is constantly growing in Texas, water is going to become more and more of an issue. So we need to keep in mind about conserving water. And so in the heat, we talk about watering, and I know all the Master Gardeners have been through a lot of training on watering, like with drip irrigation and conserving water and all that stuff. In the summer, 25% of water is used by the residential landscapes in Texas. And so we have to think about that when we design a landscape. So we need to think about, before we plant our plants that we need for the landscape, we need to think about what kind of soil we have. Do we have a limestone soil? Do we have a clay soil? Do we have a sandy soil? Do we have a silty soil? Do we have a silty clay soil? Do we have a silty clay limestone soil? Do we have a sandy silt soil? So if you look at how many have been to a Master Naturalist soil talk? Anybody? Okay, a few. Okay, that's what inspired me, okay, when I first came to Dallas. So I came back and I'm like, I love this. I love Dallas. It's changed a lot, but I love it. I love Fort Worth and Dallas, a lot of changes. But I went to the Master Naturalist meeting and I heard that talk on soils. And I just was mesmerized by the layer. I didn't ever know that we had all those layers that are, instead of being underground, like in most places, they're turned over on the side and they're all on the surface. So when you're driving, and I see it now that I'm aware of it, I notice it. I didn't notice it so much before, but in Dallas, in Fort Worth too, we have these sandy layers, like in the post oak belt, where it's a sandy soil and it's lower pH, and then we have the limestone outcroppings. That's a different layer. And then if you're driving on the Dallas North Tollway out of downtown, you're driving along, and all of a sudden you start seeing limestone, and they had to cut into the limestone to go the road, and you're in a higher, and then you drop down to lower elevation. It's a different type of clay soil. So then we have the Blackland Prairie, which is a clay soil. Then we have certain areas that are called a marl, M-A-R-Y-L, marl, I think is how you say it, and that is mixed with like rocks and fossils and clay. And then we have the silty clay soil, and that's probably the best for gardening. And I was researching what's at my parents' house, because they're close to the post oak ridges, so they have ridges of post oaks in southern Denton County, and then they have some other areas that are lower with like a silty soil, and then they have some areas that are silty mixed with clay, and that's what they have. And I looked at it on the soil map, and it's called the Sanger Formation, and a little tiny bit of the Sanger Formation comes down to where they live, and that's what we have. But if you just go across the street, it's different, and it's a really neat soil for growing like trees and shrubs. And so I'm very happy with it. I was thrilled, where I never could grow a Tropicana rose in my life, and then I plopped it in that soil, and it did great. It's doing great. I'm like, wow, okay. So your soil makes a big difference. If you have a very shallow topsoil, do you think you're going to have as good a drought resistance as if you have a deeper soil, clay soil, right? Don't you think you're going to have a better drought resistance on a clay soil or silty soil than a sandy soil or a limestone soil? Okay, so you have to consider your soil and what you're planting. Okay, what if the pH is? So the best thing to do is get a soil test first, and also something to add, especially if you have a limestone or a sandy soil. But always it's good to add some compost and organic matter, and then mulching. So if you till in 4 inches of organic matter, but also mulch is key too, because mulch will cool the root system and reduce evaporation and allow the water to penetrate the soil easier. It provides like a layer in between if you get that hard pan clay where it doesn't let the soil in, doesn't let the water in, the mulch will soften that layer and allow it in. So what you need to do when you're gardening with hot weather plants and natives, still mulching is a good thing. And the mulch there's lots of kinds of mulch. So you can get pecan hull mulch, cottonseed mulch, alfalfa mulch. There's pine bark mulch, pine straw. If you're in East Texas, you can find more pine straw than here. Then they have hardwood mulch, but coconut coir is a new mulch that's very sustainable because it's from coconut processing. And there's a really good compost if you find a coconut coir compost that's really good, made by, they sold it at Walmart, but only in the spring, and it's not every year. But I found it last year, it was really good. And then there's cypress. You see cypress mulch a lot, and how many of you know the story about cypress mulch? Okay, cypress mulch is okay, and it's a great mulch, but it has some issues because sometimes people just harvest the trees for the mulch and don't use the wood. So if it's from the timber industry and they use the cypress for timber like they do for pine trees, that's fine, just use the mulch. But if it's just wasted, so you have to see if it's just, research the company that provides cypress, see if it's sustainable or not. And there's usually some data that you can find, but that's only the caution with the cypress mulch is it might not be sustainably sourced like pine bark or pine straw or coconut coir or that kind of. Okay, so I wanted to show you this picture about native plant and adapted plant selection for hot weather. So anyone know what this plant is? The common name is black-eyed Susan, right? And it's also known as Rudbeckia, okay? It's one of the coneflower species. And believe it or not, this is Oakland Cemetery in Dallas, okay? So this could be your yard, you know? So in Oakland Cemetery, what they've done is they're working with the Constellation of Living Memorial Project, and it's also an official Master Naturalist and Master Gardener project to have volunteers and their staff to strategically mow and then not mow certain areas for prairie restoration. This is outside of the prairie restoration zone, though, where they're actually not mowing at all. This area had been mowed at 2.5 inches, and they switched the mowing height to 4.5 inches. And then all of a sudden, the people that mow, volunteers, a lot of volunteers, but also they have some limited part-time staff. And what happened was a marvelous thing. They were noticing these native plants come up. First, they noticed wine cups, so they left the area alone. The purple mallow is also what it's called, okay? And then after that, they started seeing these other plants come up, and they said, let's see what it is, right? And all of a sudden, these black-eyed Susans came up. And it was like, what on earth? And those seeds were not scattered. They weren't planted. They were there. And this area has had a mixture of grass, and it's been mowed at 2.5 inches for the last, for many years, and then it was just left fallow and full of privet. So when they cleared out all the privet, this is what came up, okay? So you can start this, once you start a native landscape, and even if you just let a small area in your yard, like you still can have some grass if you're, I don't know how the HOAs are, but sometimes you can put a sign like wildlife habitat, and they let you, or you can put like a border, rock border, and then put the wildflowers in that, and then still leave some turf grass around it that you mow. So you're reducing your turf grass that you have to water, and then you can, in the fall time is when you plant the wildflower seeds, and then let them come up, and then you might get some volunteers of seeds that were already there too, and you just monitor that. And then of course, whenever they look ugly after they set seed, then you can either mow them down or cut them down and get something else planted in there for the fall, or reseed some fall wildflowers in the summer, perennials and annuals. And it doesn't have to all be native either. You can mix some non-natives in. And in species selection, so think about how much maintenance you want to give. Water, how much water? Do you have drip irrigation? Do you not? Shade or sun, planting location. This is a side oats grama, I believe, which is a Texas state grass. And so we have, that can be also allowed to grow taller, and it looks really pretty. Establishing plants, when you have an established plant, you have to water it more frequently. Established plants do not need as frequent watering, but still a thorough soaking on a somewhat regular basis. So for instance, establishing, you've got to water it regularly or it will die. Like if I'm growing roses that I planted, or tomatoes, I'm doing tomato garden every day, roses every other day if it's new, if it's established 3 times a week. But if I'm doing shrubs or some natives, you can do it once a month, but you just got to watch hey, Crystal, hey, just watch your plants. Watch your plants. You got to watch them. There's no rule. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to water once a month, or I'm going to water once a year, or something like that, Okay, I'll give an example, and it's right at home. RB1 farm, okay. I was out there 2 days ago. All right, I'm not picking on anybody, trust me. But we had the worst drought ever last year, right? Okay? And those peach trees were hurting, okay, because of that drought, but they looked okay. And we might have watered them a little bit, but maybe not enough. But that weather, now we got that rain. So what happened is they said, oh, wow, we've got rain. So they put out a bunch of new root systems to recover from the drought. It's fresh, young roots, okay? But now all of a sudden, the rain has shut off. And now they're drooping because even though you normally wouldn't think they needed water after all that rain, but because they regrew and recovered and it's soft new growth, it's not hardened to take that drought like it was before, because that drought, that was kind of used up with last year's drought. We're going to have to so I've got to get in touch with, if you know the person in charge of the water out there, come see me and we can turn on that irrigation, okay? And then those trees will recover. That's what's happening. And so if anyone has a mystery and has been out there and seen it, and they're like, what's going on? It's going to be okay. We're just going to get some irrigation on there and monitor. So the key is monitoring. So in your landscape, monitor those plants. And if they look good and it's hot and dry and they're doing great and they look good, you don't have to water. But even if your euphoria or your yucca or whatever, euphorbias or your yuccas or whatever you have, your hollies or whatever, and they start to the leaves just start to sag a little bit, then it's time to put in some water, okay? Drip irrigation. And you might only have to do it one time, depending how well your soil holds the water. So it's not a hard, fast rule where some years you can get away without watering at all, and some years you have to do some extra. And it just takes, you have to just play it by ear a lot of times and just keep an eye on those plants to see how they're doing. And I love drip irrigation because it helps you water without wasting. Of course, all of y'all know this already, but here's a little something a little tip. So I tend to be if it's out of sight, out of mind. Okay, sometimes. Okay, that's me. Sometimes it's bad, but I am. So I know myself well enough. So if I have a plant that needs a lot of water, I'm not going to put it in the back of the garden where I'll just forget about it when I'm busy, because I'm busy. I didn't get to water like today. I didn't get to water this morning. And so I watered yesterday. So I have some stuff in pots. So I'm going to do it when I get home. But there's some right by the door as I go out in the morning, the ones that need the most water. So I make sure to get those, because that's right there. I see it. It's not in the back of the yard. It's not. So the ones that need the most water are close. Those are those fancy roses in the pots and in the clay pots, and I'm watering them most, okay? And then the ones in the ground are needing less water because they're on drip irrigation, and they don't. I just can turn it on a timer and say, okay, you get your water, and it's all good, and not as often. So the ones that need it the most should be in the areas of highest personal use, okay? And of course, seasonal schedule changes and maintaining the system and all that. Make sure your heads are in good shape, not clogged. Your drip irrigation can clog very easily. That's what Jaden told me. We were talking about drip irrigation, and see, in one of her classes, they told her that it clogs very, very badly. So drip irrigation, you have to be careful with it. And she's right. You have to make sure it doesn't get clogged. So thank you, Jaden, for that. That was something I wasn't going to say until you reminded me. So maintaining the system, and then the cycles. Make sure the cycles are set for the season, and and if you don't want to get to know your controller, then set it on manual and run it yourself whenever you need it. Rain sensors are not very reliable, but they can work. But they're not that reliable, so try your best. And I don't know if is there a law in Texas for rain sensors? In Florida, we had a law; you had to have it. But if you're smart, you can be your own rain sensor, right? Yeah, you don't want your irrigation coming on during the rain. That's annoying. The most guilty people of that are the corporate landscapes. They're the guilty ones, mostly. But I have seen cities too. Mulches, we talked about that. Moderating soil temperature, prevent soil compaction, reducing weeds. Mulches are key. And so here's a few plants that I really like that's why I'm here to talk about plants, but I had to give a little background. So some of the plants I really love, and we're here out at the Arboretum, and right out there we have an agave. It's right out behind us. planted. And you know what? Jade and I took a walk down the terrace down there, and we looked over at the waterfall and everything, and we saw them chopping up an agave, a giant agave. They were out there with machetes, and they were chopping it down. And I thought to myself, why are they doing that? Well, it's dead, or it's going to die. So it had just flowered, and the flower was done, and those die after they flower. But it had little babies next to it, so they were chopping off the big one. It's going to be dead and go away, and then the babies will come up and take its place. So, but they're very, very drought tolerant. When they flower, they're beautiful, and they attract pollinators. Hummingbirds and bees of all sorts, butterflies. Back when I was in high school, I had a teacher for high school, and I took an ecology class. They offered that back then. And he, it's called ecology. Now it's called environmental science, but it was actually ecology. And he did his graduate work on agave pollinators in Big Bend National Park. So I got to learn a ton about agaves, okay? They're really neat. And then cactus, desert willow. Look at that desert willow. And desert willow is not a willow, but it's a shrub that can tolerate low water inputs, and it flowers, but it does like to have a decent soil to set some roots in. So make sure your soil is just not a hard pan of rock or something. But it's pretty good. And it doesn't like overwatering. So don't put a desert willow and then put a bunch of hostas underneath it, right? That wouldn't work. This is a trumpet creeper. So this is really good. They have it here, the arboretum, and it's not invasive like the wisteria, and or you can get a native wisteria that's not invasive, and it'll come up an arbor and create shade and be, once it's established, you don't have to really water it at all. To get it established, you have to water it, of course. Once it's established, those roots go deep. And only in the rarest cases you need to have to water that. But you'll be able to tell if it starts drooping and leaves are turning yellow. Here we have lavender, rosemary, and asters. So those are all three really good to put together because rosemary, lavender, and asters all require low water inputs. And especially if you have a limestone area in your yard, lavender is great. It likes a rocky soil without too much organic matter. And you can easily kill a lavender with kindness. But if you're going to plant a lavender, you're not going to plant it with your hydrangeas or your roses because they wouldn't get too much water, your lavender would. So if you are interested in lavender, go take a look at Louisiana lavender. You just go online and Google Louisiana lavender, adapted lavender for the southern climate. They can take the heat, and there's some people selling especially bred lavender that's bred in Louisiana that's, I don't know the name of it off the top of my head, but it's one that's that is adapted. And then natives. So here we have bluebonnets and then the Texas poppy. I talked about rock gardens and native landscaping with wildflowers. Here's one plant I like. There's one native one that's native to the southern part of our state, and then we have vitex, which is not native, but they both do very well in the hot landscapes. And if you see already, most of our vitex has bloomed already, and now it has seed heads. And they can take the heat, but the thing with them is there's a little bit of talk where sometimes they can get out of control in certain areas. They're not necessarily invasive to say, but maybe a little out of control. And so you don't want them to be too close to natural areas. But I haven't seen like big evidence that it's really invasive. But it is nice for in the urban areas for landscaping. And if you have a smaller vitex like a dwarf, you can go and chop the old seed heads off, and it'll come out with a second bloom. Okay, but if it's really big, like you see some that grow into trees, you really can't do that. It's too hard to get up into them and do that. But they're pretty. And then the firebush, we're kind of in the northern limit for firebush, but they will come out in June or July and start coming out of the ground in that time and bloom in the fall time. And then, and they have really interesting foliage. And then when the first frost comes, they die to the ground, but you kind of leave them to let those nutrients go back into the soil, and then they're just gone. And you always think they're never going to come back, and then July they'll start poking out, and they'll be really pretty for hummingbirds and butterflies. So that's something I like. I love the verbena. This is just a cultivar called Blue Princess verbena, but I love the trailing verbena, the native. And I've seen some people replace their lawns with verbena, which is kind of neat. And then I have, of course, the Echinacea purpea, the purple coneflower. And there are a lot of hybrids of different colors of that from the nursery trade. But the native one is better at reseeding and establishing just the standard wild one. And if you put out the seeds in the fall time, they'll usually come up in the spring, but they won't bloom the first year, and then they'll bloom the second year. And they're really nice. I love them. Or you can buy a transplant, and they'll bloom right away. Okay, and New Gold Lantana. I made sure this is still on the market before I put it on there. The dwarf lantanas are nice because they can provide some color without being too invasive or getting too big. But if you have a big spot, the old-fashioned one will work too. It's actually invasive in Florida, so you're not supposed to plant it in Florida. But here in Texas, it's not considered invasive, so you can go for it. Hardy hibiscus, the mallows, those are really nice. I saw some here blooming, and they come back every year from the ground, and they can take the heat really well and bloom. The flowers usually just last a day, but they produce a lot of flowers. So as long as you give them the drip irrigation they need, they won't start flopping down and dying off, and they'll look really nice all summer. Moy Grande and Flare, and there's a new one called Peppermint Flare. Belinda's Dream Rose. Belinda's Dream is it's a earth-kind rose, and it is really good about being planted in groups of like 3 to form like an accent plant or a hedge, and they bloom. The thing, they like to be pruned, and then in the winter or February, and then they bloom really nice all year. They do like to be drip irrigated and fertilized with manure or chicken manure compost. That's what they really like, and they bloom nicely. And the earth-kind roses, this is all y'all are aware of the earth-kind roses. You know the list. This is the current list, but there's more to be added to it. And one of my favorites is the Mutabilis, and the Mutabilis will bloom peach-colored, and then it'll change to pink, deep pink, with the heat, with the sun. And so, you know, as long as you got some organic matter, you can put the roses in any soil type, and they can tolerate a pH from 5.5 to 7.5. But do a soil test to make sure you have what your pH is, so you know it. And another one that's really nice is the Senzio. They call it Texas sage, but that gets confusing because we have a lot of salvias that are great that also are purple. So Senzio, and this one really, I've heard some spider mites can be a problem on here, right? On Texas sage, but if you ever get spider mites, the thing is to get a really forceful stream of water from your hose on one of those hose ends that produces a real forceful stream, and just wash them down. Wash the plant down, undersize the whole plant, and do it for 3 days straight. You'll kill them because you'll interrupt their life cycle, okay? So that's a non-pesticide way of killing spider mites. I've done it. It works. You have to be committed to it, okay? But I love this for flowering and for drought tolerance. Turk's Cap. It's another mallow, and it does really well. Of course, rock rose is another one. Turk's Cap can do well in the sun or the shade. It'll take more water in the sun, but in the shade, it's really nice as well. Gets a little taller in the shade. Rain lilies. So the rain lilies have aranthus. You can get those in the ground, and they will kind of hide, and then they'll come up in the fall and bloom after some rains. They're pretty. And of course, the spiderwort. So this is a weed in Florida, but spiderwort is a plant that I love in Texas because it doesn't get out of control, real drier, and stay in more control. It's native, and it can really take the drought, and it just gets some roots and just captures the water and just keeps on blooming. If you mow it down or cut it down, it'll come back with more blooms the next time. So all throughout the year. And thank you for listening. I had a few suggestions of your native and non-native drought-tolerant plants. Is there any other questions you have for me? Okay, great question. Okay, so there are a lot of nurseries in the DFW area. They're all over, especially in the northern part of the Metroplex. I can shout out like a bunch of different names. I give talks at different nurseries, but if you go on Google and type in native plant nurseries, you'll get a list. And I don't want to just endorse one over the other by saying a name, because then I'll be like, oh, you're endorsing that one and the other one. But there are a lot of good native nurseries around, and if you search native plant nurseries, you'll find them for Texas. There are a lot of them. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. How about another warm welcome or a round of applause for Matt? Thank you. And welcome to Texas. Next, we would like to say, sadly, a fond goodbye to Maureen O'Hanahan. So Maureen has been with the Master Gardener program since 2018. And she is currently relocating to Harker Heights near Killeen, Texas. Harker Heights is in Bell County, and the Bell County Master Gardeners are in for a pleasant surprise. If they only knew how great she is and how much of an attribute she will be to their program. So Maureen has stayed busy as a Master Gardener. She joined the Moss Haven Elementary Farm as a project coordinator in 2018. The same year, she became a Master Gardener, so she wasted no time in getting active. Maureen volunteered there until Moss Haven lost its project status earlier this year. At Moss Haven, she could apply all of her extraordinary grandma skills. She has 18 grandkids across 4 states. Plus, she has extraordinary Master Gardener skills to share as well. Maureen shared her passion of all things green, native, and homegrown with fellow Master Gardeners, students, and parents. Her constant smile, warm heart, and contagious laughter brought joy to all who worked with her, who visited and attended classes that she helped to teach. In addition to her work at Moss Haven, Maureen volunteered in 2019 to co-lead the help desk. This is no small task. So as part of the help desk program, she had no idea when she joined that COVID was about to hit and that there would be a tornado that would shut down the building. So Maureen and Rick quickly joined forces, and undaunted, they contacted the Collin County and Denton County Master Gardener programs to get new ideas on ways that they could help the help desk. Maureen was instrumental in setting up the current all-volunteer, email-based work-from-home system that the help desk currently uses. She organized a series of continuing education Zoom presentations by AgriLife experts and others to help burnish the skills of help desk volunteers and constantly look for ways to help make the help desk more effective. Sadly, Maureen's work wouldn't let her join us today, so I would highly encourage all of you to email Maureen and let her know how much she'll be missed. And I would also like to thank Patty Brewer, Rick Koch, and Lois Diggs for helping to write the bio today. And as a goodbye present, she will be receiving a book entitled Creating a Deer and Rabbit-Proof Garden. So Ryan is the 2014 recipient of the Dallas County Master Gardener Scholarship. It's a $2,500 scholarship. Ryan resides in Dallas County. He graduated from Richardson High School. He's a homegrown kid. He attended Texas A&M, or is attending Texas A&M Commerce, majoring in agricultural science and technology. Ryan has dedicated himself to a degree in horticulture and a career in the industry. He states, "While my botanical journey took root in a time of uncertainty, it has since blessed me with the community, friendships, introspection, and a mission." Ryan's AP environmental science teacher, who mentions his drive, dedication, and integrity, states, "I can honestly say he is the kind of student that proves to me why I became a teacher." So we have a very worthy young gentleman who will be receiving the $2,500 Master Gardener Scholarship.
Okay, so if you guys are anything like I am, you've driven by the Museum of Biblical Arts 1,000 times and had no idea what it was. It's on Park Lane, right by North Park. I'd seen it, no idea what this was. But if you haven't heard of it, the Museum of Biblical Arts is a museum in Dallas. It was founded by Mattie Carruth in 1966. The Carruth family is one of the Dallas founding families, so it's been around a long time. It is 3 museums in one, and it's dedicated to teaching and exhibiting artwork with themes related to the Bible, with a focus on building bridges between those with a Christian and Jewish background. It also houses the National Center for Jewish Art and the Museum of Holocaust Art. After a devastating fire and rebuild, Jan Weir was a member of the garden consultation team that responded when the Museum of Biblical Arts asked for assistance. Jan soon became this project's champion. And today we're honoring Master Gardener, class of 2018, Jan Weir, with the Making a Difference Award, recognizing Jan's contribution to the restoration of the garden in this iconic public space. The garden had been neglected for several years, and according to one member of the team, the garden looked frankly, quote, terrible. In her role as a champion, Jan recruited help from fellow master gardeners. She asked each to design a garden area using information she provided about plants that had sacred text reference and those plants that were typical to the terrain of the historical Holy Land. After spearheading the repair of the irrigation system, Jan recruited Dallas Jesuit High School students, all seniors, to help with the physical labor. And prior to each work session, Jan gave 10-minute informal presentation to the high schoolers and the non-master gardener volunteers concerning plants and best landscape practices. It was described as an amazing opportunity and a very efficient process that Jan organized. Scott Peck, who's the director of the Museum of Biblical Arts, gives Jan all the credit with bringing the garden back to life. And in addition to introducing a lot of students to gardening, and I was thinking how much these young men will go forward and be able to have yards of their own someday. And I took the opportunity to visit the garden, and I found it to be an incredibly thoughtful place with a clear theme. The plantings were not only lovely, but they also had direct references to the sculptures, the sacred texts, and also were very typical to the Holy Land. So let me go forward one here. Here is wine cup that is planted below a sculpture called the Wine-Stained Rose. And in the Passion of Christ sculptures, we have passion vine and also papyrus, which is from the Middle East. She has a very vibrant fig tree planted that was literally covered in fruit, and of course typical to the Holy Land. And the hyssop has many biblical and other sacred text references. Jan's credentials include advanced vegetable training. She's also a NIPSOT native plant certified. She served on the association nominating committee. And as a Master Gardener project coordinator, she has coordinated the Dallas County Juvenile Detention Centers for both boys and for girls. Additionally, she's a Master Gardener in Santa Fe County in New Mexico. And Jan, we're delighted to honor you today with the Making a Difference Award for making a difference in our community. So, Jan.
Dallas County Master Gardener Association's nominating committee is currently developing a slate of candidates for the following positions: President, First Vice President over fundraising, Second Vice President, Member Services, Secretary, Treasurer. We will need 2 directors at large, 2 TMGA directors, 2 TMGA director alternates, 2 nominating committee members. Financial Review Committee, we will need 1. So as you can add up, that's a lot of people. Each term of office will be for 2 years, from January 1st, 2025 through December 31st, 2026. In accordance with the DCMGA bylaws, the nominating committee is issuing a call to the membership, that's all of you, for nominations for these positions. You may nominate yourself, or you may nominate a fellow Master Gardener in good standing. To learn more about the job descriptions, please review the bylaws or feel free to contact those board members and committee members who are currently in those positions. The committee will present a slate at least 14 days prior to the October annual business meeting of the membership, at which time a vote will occur. Nominations will also be accepted from the floor at the annual meeting, provided that the nominator and nominee are both members in good standing, and that the nominee is present and consents to have his or her name placed in nomination. Please send your nominations to Abby Bolish, chairperson of the nominating committee, by emailing her at the address above. Thank you in advance for your help with the nomination process. If you have any questions after the meeting, both Helen Dulac and I are members of the committee and would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Jenna Woods from the class of 2011, and I'm here with Nancy Nance, and we want to encourage y'all to come and volunteer at the Arboretum. I mean, how many places are as beautiful as this? And every time I come and volunteer at the Arboretum, I'm so thrilled and inspired. In fact, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. Thrilled and inspired by the beauty, and the people they're so happy here. Can you come to the Arboretum and not have a smile on your face? And there are so many wonderful and exciting volunteer opportunities here. We all have so much knowledge that we have learned through Master Gardeners and through our years of volunteering. And this is a fabulous place to talk with the people visiting here and share your knowledge. And everyone is always so appreciative with the knowledge that you do share with them. And so many of the people come here, I mean, they want to see the beauty here, but they also want to learn about the plants many times. And I know that I always learn something every single time I come here, whether I come here during the springtime when everything's in bloom and I get to see all the different tulips and daffodils and all the different combinations, and it inspires me so to do something different in my yard the next year. Or whenever in the summer I can come here and see what plants are thriving and are at least, maybe not thriving, but at least surviving in our Texas heat. And in the fall, I love coming and seeing the leaves turning and all the fall color. And then in the wintertime, I love and so enjoy seeing the bones of the garden and looking at the Japanese maples and seeing the shape, the elegant shapes of the branches and whatnot. So it's so inspiring. You can share your knowledge, but also be learning. And there's so many training opportunities here at the Arboretum. They set you up for success as much as they can, and all you have to do is sign up for the training. And I have found that even if some of the volunteer opportunities that I want to be involved in, even if they unfortunately do not count for Master Gardener, they are some of my favorite volunteer experiences. Every year I sign up to be Santa's helper, and let me tell you, if that doesn't put a smile on your face and a skip in your step, nothing will. It is a fabulous volunteer opportunity. I also love reading books, garden books to the children. So there's just a wealth of volunteer opportunities here, and Nancy Nance and I want to encourage y'all to sign up, and I'm gonna pass the microphone over to Nancy now.
And I don't know, I feel very much like she does, and there's so many things that we're here for. One of them certainly is to come and to continue learning and then continue sharing that learning. And it's a kind of a magic thing, I think. The Arboretum itself is, as also she said, it's just one of those places where I'm dashing around and late for a meeting here and getting there, and I get here to the Arboretum, and it's just like, because it's always, you always know it's going to be beautiful and wonderful. I think too, the other thing we have, and this number still blows me away every time I quote it, we have over 1 million people who visit the Arboretum on a yearly basis. And it's such an opportunity for us and such fun to share. One of our vegetable gardens is right outside here. If it's not 103 degrees, check it out. But people come in, and some of them, don't even speak English. But, you can still communicate looking at all these beautiful things in the garden. And it's amazing, too, for what people will come in and the stories they will share with you. Oh, my gosh. People either lie a lot at their vegetable gardens or, completely ignoring what you're saying. We had a gentleman out here not long ago, and he was looking at I think it was green bean month or something not too exciting. So he was looking around trying to determine, I guess, what had happened to his green beans. So, of course, we go through as good gardeners, we're trying to help him. And you go, did you do this? Did this happen? And so he finally said, well, I went to one of those big dollar stores, and I bought a whole bunch of soil. And we're thinking, okay, well, that still should be okay. And so we went through, it took us about 10 times guessing. He finally fessed up that it was that rubbery stuff that you put in your kids' playground. Oh. That's what he utilized. But I mean, that, sharing, hopefully he learned a lot from that little interlude with us. So anyway, I don't know, to me, that's another one of the best things, is just all the people you can talk to. And it's like plants are universal language. They really seem to be. So thank you all so much for being here today. Please come back. I think you would really enjoy it. And as Jenna hinted here, it's not quite as easy as most of our other projects. But if you go online to the Arboretum's, I think it's the Arboretum's website you have to start with, and just sign up for being a Dallas County Master Gardener volunteer, and it takes you through the process. You have to go through several steps. We're big believers in training, so we don't just set you out somewhere in a garden, because obviously we want you to come back and feel good about your experience, and hopefully you will all come back and check us out. Typical activities, boy, Jenna's probably the better one to do this, because I kind of like my little places. This is one of my very favorite places here, in a tasteful place. We have a garden just outside of that, and it's, again, mainly our vegetable garden, but again, great things are out there. If you're into cooking, we have tons of cooking types of things, groups that come in. We have a chef on staff that comes up with goodies. Children, if you enjoy children, and I would bet most people in this room hopefully will say that. We have a children's garden, which is absolutely incredible. They have all sorts of wonderful things for kids. They have a program for teachers as well, for them to learn new and different things. Garden guide, and this is probably my favorite things to do, because basically you're just wandering through the garden, and we understand not today, because probably there are very few guests. And that's the other thing that kind of gets me or surprised me about the Arboretum. Everyone here is a guest. We never say a customer or this or whatever. It's kind of like welcoming him or her to our home, away from home. So that's another thing that makes the Arboretum a little bit, hopefully we're welcoming to any and every person who comes through the gate. Oh, greenhouse, yes, we do have a state-of-the-art greenhouse. That's an absolutely incredible place. We had, when I came to volunteer here that many years ago, we had a very, very old, leaky greenhouse, and then two very generous people came along and gave us a beautiful, beautiful greenhouse that's about halfway between here and Mesquite. And we grow I think we're up to about 70 to 80% of plants that are planted here are also grown in our greenhouse, which makes the cost, and what a difference. It allows us to do all different kinds of things with less money, but in the bottom line. Let me think, if you're into new and what's different in the plant world, we have a trial garden, and we're one of the only, I think we're something like the 5th largest, biggest plant trial area in this area. And that's another thing to see what the growers have come up with. And we plant it in the garden. Our staff takes, this one did well because this one didn't do very well. And then that week, that month that's planted, it's tracked for 12 weeks, or 12 months, what am I saying, 12 months. And then the staff takes all the data on that, what's done well, what hasn't done well, takes it back to the grower, and then that kind of will help us all, the buyers, decide what we're going to be looking at in the nurseries next year. So it's kind of technical kind of thing, but it's a kind of cool thing to that we have such a thing. Anything else? All right, well, I think that's a question. Can we ask questions? Anybody have questions? Well, if you have, I'll be here for a while, so please just let me know. It's wonderful to see you here, and we do definitely want to see you all back.
All right, time for the raffle. So we have 6 plants that were carefully selected out of TDG, and we also have 2 additional items which are not on this list. A cooling towel and a fan.
And 2 passes to the Arboretum.
Oh, and 2 passes to the Arboretum. So that concludes the raffle. Our next meeting will be in August. There's no meeting in July, so y'all get a break from the heat, and we'll be back here in August. So please be careful when you're out working in the gardens. We don't want anyone ending up in the hospital with heat stroke. Stay hydrated. And I believe that's it. Yes, thank you all for coming.